They are the ultimate bookends of this wild adventure we call life. The day we're born and the day we die. Both days, or more specifically moments, are great mysteries for every single one of us. Unless you have a supernatural memory, there is zero recollection of the moment we arrive into this world, which is probably a good thing. Still, though, I've often thought it would be cool to remember what it was like when we opened our eyes for the first time. Maybe not. The second biggest moment of our lives, our exit, is shrouded in mystery also. We are given no clue as to when it will come, what it will look like, or how it will happen. We just know it's coming. Now, depending on your religious or spiritual beliefs, you might have an idea of what happens next. Buddhists and Hindus believe that death marks the end of this life and passage into another, just one spoke among the infinite spokes in samsara, a cycle of countless births and deaths until you gain enlightenment. Sounds cool, if not a little lengthy. If you're a good Muslim, Hindu, Christian, or Jew, as in you followed the doctrines set out in your respective religion, congrats. You're on your way to another dimension, where your soul may continue in some form. You may be resurrected, or you may go to a version of what some religions refer to as heaven. Godspeed, as they say. For the atheists among us, it's pretty cut and dry. Consciousness ceases to exist, and there is no afterlife or supernatural continuation to speak of. It's back into the dirt for you. I've witnessed both a life coming into this world and one leaving, as I'm sure some of you listening have. Experiencing these enormously powerful events can be agonizing or beautiful or profound or all of them at once. Today, how we come into this world and how we leave is the subject of much debate. The role of our medical system, our rights to determine the process, and ultimately the power we have as individuals, families, lovers, friends, to play a role in how lives begin and how they end is, well, kind of a giant deal. Not a light subject, I know, but here in the Basin, there are people who have dedicated their lives, pardon the pun, to ensuring these monumental moments are the most beautiful they can possibly be. So let's meet some of them. Welcome to our episode on life and death. I'm Mitchell Scott, Editor-in-Chief of Kootenay Mountain Culture Productions, and this is the Headwaters, brought to you by Columbia Basin Trust. Like everywhere else in the world, being born and dying occurs here also, in homes and hospitals all around the basin. But how and where these big events happen differs from person to person. In this episode, you will hear from Basin residents whose lives are either dedicated to bringing people into this world or supporting them when they leave it, and sometimes both. You'll also learn about a 1960s counterculture birth movement that some say shaped how one Kootenay hospital practices birthing today. Around the world, on average, 140 million babies are born every year. In the Basin, we're responsible for about 1,200 of those. To bring these bouncing babes into our communities takes knowledge, experience, and at times, intuition. And thankfully, it's not only physicians, nurses, and obstetricians who guide the process, it's also the midwives. Writer Emily Nielsen gets into the history of midwives in the West Kootenay and learns more about the practice of midwifery in the Basin today. Emily, welcome back to the Headwaters.
It's great to be back.
Okay, so where does this story start?
Yeah, I wondered the same thing. My experience with midwifery is only very recent, like within the last 5 years.
You've got a little boy now, don't you?
That's right. But the Basin region has a long, unique relationship to the practice. I connected with Megan Davies, a health historian and emeritus professor from York University. She researched BC's radical home birth and midwifery movement and its deep roots in this area.
What happened in the Kootenays from the mid-70s to kind of the mid-80s was a real surge of interest and activity in childbirth outside institutions. And it was a real high point of activity and organization. And it was everything up in the Kootenays at that point in the counterculture was really grassroots. This whole birthing stuff was so women-centered. It was so holistic in terms of its approach to health and well-being. And it was also, and I think sometimes this is underestimated, it was extremely political because at that point, midwifery was illegal. So it was kind of outside the law. And midwives took on a tremendous responsibility, of course, as any midwife does, but also a legal responsibility.
I'm going to pause to mention midwifery only became legal in 1998. Megan shared how midwives were sort of out in the community, but also slightly hidden. They'd often be paid with trades like eggs, vegetables, house cleaning. One of the midwives was given a handmade teapot in exchange for childbirth.
We think about that period and we think, oh yeah, those bearded men, Greenpeace guys, they were like so political. But those women were doing something equally radical, but they were doing it in people's homes. So it didn't have that same profile. But I really see that they were shifting the paradigm, not in terms of the environment, but they were shifting the paradigm in terms of birth. I see these women, the midwives and the birthing mothers and men that were involved as well, really taking a new kind of responsibility for their well-being and for the whole birthing process. So there was counterculture activity and back to the land movement in Nova Scotia, in Quebec, even in Saskatchewan and Alberta and Manitoba. But BC, it was big in BC, and it was biggest and most mythical in the Kootenays. Like the Kootenays was the mythical place that you would go back to the land in Canada. And home birth and midwifery became part of that, and I would argue a really important part of that.
To give a little statistical context to how midwifery was more evident in the Kootenays, Megan's research shared that in 1980, a federal study found that 8% of births in the region took place at home, compared to 1 to 2% elsewhere in British Columbia.
I guess that's not all that surprising. Our funky little corner of the world has definitely been a destination for all kinds of people looking to do things a little differently. I'm thinking of the influx of draft dodgers back to the landers in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, exactly. This social movement was taking place within that context. Megan had many stories about this time as shared by the midwives, but for me, this one really painted a picture of that era.
I remember hearing about one birth in Argenta, and it was in an A-frame, so classic 70s back to the land. And the woman went upstairs after Thanksgiving dinner to her bed because I think she didn't feel that well and she was actually in labor, and then she hemorrhaged. And she told me that as she was hemorrhaging, her whole concern was for the midwife because she thought, if I die, my midwife is going to get charged with my death.
So as Megan says, these were really capable back-to-the-landers. They cut a hole in the floor of the loft and lowered the hemorrhaging mother down. The station wagon was waiting, their quasi-ambulance, and they took her to the hospital where she gave birth.
They were determined to do things out of the system, but they were really responsible. They had a plan. You know, it's quite impressive. And it was political, and it was about their culture.
When Megan says it was political, she's referring to the movement against the rise of medically managed birth. Megan points out that midwifery in Canada, both with Indigenous cultures and early parts of Euro-Canadian settlements, long precedes the medical system we know today. But over the 19th and 20th centuries, in general, there was a big shift from home to hospital births, and midwives who were, remember, practicing outside of the law were, for the most part, marginalized by physicians. I'll let Megan explain what else these early Kootenay midwives represented.
I feel like it's a really interesting representation of how small-scale participatory democracy and community-focused initiative can create these spaces of hope for us. And I feel like this story is a space of hope. It's a signpost of what can be done in community. I see this kind of resistance, this creativity. And I don't think this is just a moment to be nostalgic about. I think that's cheapening the critique that was inherent in this, a critique of capitalism, institutionalization, and an industrial kind of medical system. That they did this political thing and they did it so creatively and so holistically.
Many of the midwives Megan spoke to, those practicing in the West Kootenay in the 60s and 70s, a time she calls the golden age of Kootenay midwifery, they left in the 80s for various reasons, one being that the local medical system was just not receptive to their practice. But she believes the legacy they left, as well as the hard work of the midwives who stayed, may have influenced how midwifery is currently practiced.
Tell me about that. What does midwifery look like in our region today?
Well, it looks like all sorts of things. To hear about it firsthand, I connected with Michelle Cameron, a registered midwife for almost 20 years, now practicing out of Nelson. Full disclosure, Michelle was my midwife, and the last time she came to my house was to measure our newborn on the floor with a weigh scale Michelle brings to her home visits.
How's it going? You came on your bike.
Yeah, I tied
e-bike.
a tree.
You got your diapers.
I'm going to a home visit after.
Can I get you something? A cup of tea or anything?
Do you have herbal tea?
Yeah. I got nettle, Bengal spice, peppermint. This one is...
Bengal spice?
Bengal spice, yeah.
After I list off the cliche of my tea drawer, I asked Michelle about the transition that happened after midwifery became a legislated profession.
So before then, there were women delivering babies, and sometimes you could find a physician to support you in your practice that you could call on if you needed help. And then when midwifery became legislated, it was such a big unknown for a lot of nurses and doctors to understand who these people were, because they were just out in the community doing random things before, and now it's a legislated profession, and they didn't know how to integrate, and it took a lot of work for registered midwives to convince their community healthcare professionals that they were legitimate and had skills, and they had to pass exams and do education.
Michelle noted that some midwives were exempt from going through an official education program due to the experience they already had. She also shared that the uptake from hospitals was a pretty mixed bag.
And some communities, the uptake with the hospital and doctors was really positive, and the midwives massaged their way in and developed good relationships, and some communities not at all. And you'll see that still to this day, where some midwives aren't really well accepted.
When people think of a midwife, they may picture someone delivering a baby in someone's home or in a yurt, which, yes, Michelle has done. But the scope of their practice is much wider than this. They provide pre- and postnatal care, which can include recommending natural remedies like drinking red raspberry leaf tea, and more medical supports like doing ultrasounds, checking the mother's blood pressure, or ordering lab tests, among other things. But in order to practice in a hospital, they need to apply and reapply every year for specific privileges. For example, if they have specialized skills and certification to do things like oxytocin inductions or surgical assist, they have to be approved by the hospital. And in the Basin, some hospitals allow midwives to do these things and some don't.
So what are the options for women or families in the region who want to have a midwife?
Yeah, it depends on where you live and whether or not there are midwives there. It really varies by community. Many people don't know this, but giving birth can be quite costly for families that don't live near a hospital with obstetrical services. They have to relocate for around 3 weeks before their due date. And this also applies to people wanting to have an out-of-hospital birth with a midwife. They would have to stay with a friend, get an Airbnb, or rent a hotel room, none of which is covered, and not to mention hotels don't really want you giving birth in their rooms anymore. Most midwives want to be around 30 minutes to an hour from a hospital with obstetrical services, but it's really up to the midwife how far they feel comfortable traveling.
So I've gone up to an hour away for a home birth, and I'm comfortable with that. But when you add in a snowstorm or, when you go up the valley, very foggy roads in the middle of the night, sometimes I feel like I'm putting my safety at risk. And certainly I think about my second attendant and the doula and the potential paramedics that may need to also come to the person's home in untoward weather. And I tell people, sure, it might only take half an hour, 45 minutes to get to the hospital, but in a winter storm, our paramedics, the ambulances, they don't have four-wheel drive. Your driveway is very steep. And the reality is if there is a winter storm, your partner's not going to want to leave your side to go shovel the driveway.
So as you just heard, there's a lot of things for midwives to consider, both their own safety and the safety of the women and babies they're caring for.
Got it. It's not so easy having a baby in the hinterland. Okay, now, just to be clear, we're talking about registered midwives. Are there still people in the Kootenays delivering babies in an unregistered way, or women having babies unassisted at home, say in the forest by themselves?
Yeah, as you can imagine, that exists. It's known as free birthing or the sovereign birth movement, but that would have to be a whole other episode. One thing Michelle emphasized was that the once fraught relationship between midwives and physicians, it's come a long way since the end of the last century. At least this is the case in one of the hospitals Michelle practices at, Kootenay Lake Hospital in Nelson. It's been celebrated for the very integrated care model that has midwives, doctors, and nurses working together. I went to the maternity ward at Kootenay Lake Hospital to speak with one of their obstetricians.
My formal name is Shiraz Mullah. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist here at Kootenay Lake Hospital. I go by various titles, including Raz, Mullah the doula, etc.
To confirm, that's Mullah the doula. It's also written on the arm of his purple work hoodie. Dr. Mullah likes to say he looks after all aspects of the human condition. He's been at Kootenay Lake Hospital for 21 years. So when he started, midwives had only been legally practicing for 6 years.
When I arrived here, there were providers who formerly were unregistered midwives, who were now registered midwives, working within the hospital fold, and physicians who once upon a time were perhaps not so supportive of midwives, who are now working very closely with midwives. And then there are obviously still, as there were then, individuals in the community that are providing some aspects of care, but in a non-registered fashion. So yeah, it was certainly a whole hodgepodge.
Dr. Mullah says that when he arrived, a lot of the friction between midwives and physicians had mostly been ironed out, and that now, after 2 decades, they've managed to create a less hierarchical system of reproductive care around birth. Even still, he recognizes that for some women, especially those wanting a home birth, the hospital setting can be challenging.
Sometimes, again, patients may have had a planned home delivery with one of our midwives, and then for a variety of reasons need to transfer to hospital. In which case, for instance, if there's an abnormal fetal heart or if the mother's unwell, then the obstetrician may be called to attend that patient. And understandably, the patient may not be happy to see us, which I get, right? Like, they may be scared, they're not in their own home, the situation may be quite tense if the baby's heart rate is abnormal, if the mother's blood pressure is very high, and I'm a stranger to them. And it's amazing to me that I sometimes will meet people for 5 minutes and literally I'm cutting them open 5 minutes later and they're okay with it, right? And like I said, I think part of that from my perspective, well, like I said, I think obviously it's a privilege to be able to look after folks, but I also feel like our hospital provides a safe place.
A safe place. Isn't that what we all want when we're going through some of the hardest and most profound moments in our lives? I'm going to let Megan Davies, the historian, close out this story. She shared that the midwives she spoke to all filled different pieces of the puzzle. Some were motivated by feminism, some were interested in the birthing science, and others were drawn to the more herbal or natural aspects of midwifery. Regardless of their draw, they were there to support their community, and this support continues to this day.
We need to understand that we have within us and within our communities those people who can help us with these difficult life moments and difficult moments that we as a society are facing.
Life brings all sorts of adventures. But if you're listening to this, chances are the biggest adventure is yet to come, death. And like all good adventures, sometimes the journey can go a little smoother if you've got a guide. Emily Nielsen has more on this.
The other day, my 4-year-old asked what happens after we die. We were driving through traffic in Vancouver, heading home to the Kootenays. It felt like a pretty existential way to start the journey. I wasn't prepared to answer him because, well, I don't really know. Since then, reflecting on the avoidantly meandering answer I gave him, I've been thinking about death a lot. How did I not know how to answer his question? Most of us are, let's just say, a little awkward around death. But I recently sat down with someone who's hoping to shift this.
My name is Lily Mayall, and we're talking about death. I really love to be involved in changing how we are around death in our culture.
Lily Mayall is a Nelson-based death doula. A death doula, also called an end-of-life doula, is someone who supports people and their families with the dying process. Lily has been doing this for decades.
Well, my first experience with death was with my father's death, which was a very long time ago. And it shook me through to my boots and moved me to places I didn't know I had. So it always feels like a beautiful thing to be shaken loose of preconceived ideas and having to stretch yourself into the unknown and the mystery. And so that was the first thing that happened for me. I worked in extended care, so I thought we could do a better job with people, be better at supporting people, just like at a birth. Also, I realized that the journey of death can do the same thing. If we embrace the journey, that we can make it profound for everybody, the person who's dying, their family and close immediate friends and the whole community, to expand into loving presence and alignment with that person.
When Lily moved to the Kootenays, she took several workshops on death rituals, and she started to become more comfortable around what she called the D word. She explained how her role alongside the Nelson End of Life Society is to both help families move through the logistics and legacy of dying, as well as to support the dying process itself.
When we're birthing, we know this baby's gonna come. This is something we need to do. So how's that gonna happen? It can be scary. We're often terrified. How are we gonna get this baby out? It feels like it's gonna be a lot of pain. It feels like we're out of control. We don't know what's gonna happen. This is a total, And the same thing about death. This is a moment or not a moment, this is a process and a journey. And we can look at it as an adventure where this is uncharted territory. We don't know where we're going, but we can be aware that we can have comfort. We can be provided comfort. We can get in touch with the fact that we know actually how to do this, and trust it, and trust and surrender to the process.
One of the roles of being a death doula, Lily says, is to help people be able to trust the unfolding process of dying and to see it as a journey, an adventure.
We're going into the unknown. We will be supported. There will be so much love there. We can make choices. We can be surrounded by whoever we want. We can say no. We can say yes. And we can make it into our journey. Just like no two births are identical. Every death is its own. But if we can somehow surrender to embrace it and let go of our fears around losing control and perhaps pain or perhaps all these things, and trust that process, I'm hoping I can do it.
We talked about death for almost an hour, but it felt like a conversation that could fill an entire lifetime. Lily shared that her work as a death doula relies on intuition, really feeling into what is needed for the person or family at any given moment.
What I've learned and where I strive to be, because I think it's partly because of this work and it's partly because I'm an older woman now, is that I like being aligned with the present moment and being available to try and intuit what needs to happen. And so I try and step out of the way of myself to help them step out of the way of themselves so that we can all be in alignment with the highest thing that needs to unfold at that moment in time.
One of the ways Lily seemed to stay in touch with this intuitive space is through art. Her home is filled with bright, magical realism artwork she's mostly painted. She joked that her friends say, if you stand still for long enough, Lily may put her paintbrush on you too. We head down to her basement studio where she was working on a new piece.
Hi, darling. So this is what I'm working on right now.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to have a lot of mushrooms and stuff. Like, this is just a work in process. I got to make her body look a bit older, and I don't know how to do it. I'm trying to make her head look older now. But anyway, and then there's going to be a lot more branches and stuff and mushrooms and fungus growing on here. But this is just a work in progress.
The painting so far is of an old woman curled under a birch tree, with roots growing in and around her. There's an ease and an acceptance to what appears to be a contentedly dead body returning to the earth. Lily is clearly comfortable talking about death and bringing it to life, so to speak, through her art. With this ease, as a death doula, Lily's part of a group who sings to people who are dying, called the Threshold Singers.
We usually go to the bedside with the three of us go and we sing harmonies, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you want my friend to come over and sing a harmony with me?
I would love that. Yeah.
She calls her friend and fellow Threshold singer Sandy Joyce, and 10 minutes later, I'm unexpectedly lying on a couch in Lily's living room, preparing to hear songs they sing to the dying.
Did I have my eyes open or closed?
Well, you just relax yourself. I want to make sure that you're relaxed. Hang on. It's going to go under your knees a bit.
This is not what this isn't where I thought the interview was going to go.
That you were dying today.
That you were going to sung to.
Dear one, thank you for all you have done.
As I lie there, listening to Sandy and Lily, I feel comforted by their comfort with death. I still don't really know how to answer my son when he asks about what happens when we die. What I do know is, as we head into the true unknown, it's going to be okay, especially if we're in the hands of people like Lily.
You are so loved, Emily. You are so loved. You are so loved.
And now it's time for...
It's a Tiny Town.
This tiny town is way off the beaten track. Located under the mighty Purcell Mountains, tucked away on the northeast corner of Kootenay Lake, the settlement of Argenta is regionally famous for its colorful past. A place where Quakers and draft-dodging back-to-the-landers created a harmonious community. On a rainy day in July, I pulled in to chat with longtime resident Chris Peterson.
Came here when I was 26 to do an apprenticeship in timber framing, and now I just turned 60. So,
nice.
Breath of time.
It's a pretty tiny little community driving up here. It's less a town and more like a winding road through the forest with some cabins.
Yeah, I think it helps us because we're the end of the road, so you can't drive through to get anywhere else, and that is part of the feeling. The Quaker influence is definitely part of it, but really we don't have non-resident landowners. So in for the long haul, so to speak.
How many people live here?
110, and I've been here for that long enough to know that when you lose one, you gain one.
Argenta is a hyper-creative, independent, and industrious little place. The community has been generating its own hydroelectric power since the 50s. They've got their own fire brigade, which played a huge role in saving their community from a large wildfire back in 2024. It has a knack for producing incredible musicians, and they've got the most special forest cemetery you will ever see.
Yep, our cemetery was established by the Quakers in 1953. I'm on the board of directors. There's 3 of us who kind of maintain our forested little cemetery. And it's always been that we organized to have the hole dug by a local guy. And the family has a service in the forest for their loved one. And then everyone picks up a shovel and fills in the hole, and it's been that way for years. And I've got some really fond memories of families after the service for their loved one is to, spend that time, a whole bunch of people handing shovels to other people, and whether it's storytelling or singing or whatever it is, putting your loved one back to the earth. And it's a super nice thing that was left to us from the Quakers.
And that's our podcast on life and death in the basin. To find out more about the people and places in this episode, make sure to visit headwaterspodcast.com. The Headwaters is brought to you by Columbia Basin Trust. To find out more about all the good things the Trust does when it comes to supporting people and communities in the basin, go to ourtrust.org. The Headwaters is produced by Kootenay Mountain Culture Productions. A big thanks to our reporter for this episode, Emily Nielsen. Graham Tracy is our sound engineer. Tara Cunningham, our story editor and producer. Vince Hemsall manages our online content. Stacy Muchowski makes all of our custom art. And Jesse Lee our music. I'm Mitchell Scott. Thanks for listening.